guys.
Hey,
I'm Stephanie.
and I'm Tiffany.
And we are
Sisters of the South.
It's a really rad day here in the SOS studio, and we're coming to you for the month of October as Southern Sisters of Spirit.
Spirits.
And today we're going to share with you a very creepy true crime story from the 1970s here in Houston, Texas. And he is actually the very first Candyman documented here in Houston. We've already shared the second Candyman that poisoned his son, but there's also another one that did way more damage to the Houston area. And so we wanted to share that story with you today. But before we get started with that, we wanted to give a little shout out to SoFly.
SoFly!
They are a small Houston family-owned company that does accessories for embroidery and lasering for things like keychains, caps, beanies, hoodies, jackets, aprons, and they will take just a regular old gift and they'll make it really special for any special occasion that you may have. So we're going to put their information down in the description box and reach out to them and see what they can do for you. They do fabulous work. They do our merchandise, and we would love to be able to share their talent with you. So reach out to them, see what they can do.
And guys, Christmas is coming up and everyone needs a good gift.
Yeah, and it's time. It's time to get those orders in because Christmas is right around the corner.
Yeah, I need to do that.
Oh my gosh. I know. And they are growing, guys. They are really getting the recognition here in Houston. So get out there and get some ideas and get some orders in there so you can get your stuff in time for Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that being said, I'm going to trade off from these back to my real glasses so I can see while Tiffany starts the story.
Well, actually, first, I do want to remind everyone to please like and share this story if you deem it worthy enough to like and share with your friends.
Please.
Please subscribe for more true crime content every week, which is absolutely free. Free. And free is always amazing, guys.
Free is really rad.
I love free.
And we ain't joshing you on that.
Okay, so now it's time for the story. And I will say this story was extremely hard for me. It took me a long time to get all the information just because, well, you'll see.
Very traumatic.
Very traumatic. So with that being said, let's get started. Let's go. All right. So Dean Arnold Corll was born on December 24th, 1939 in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He was the first child of Mary Emma Robison and Arnold Edwin Corll. In 1946, Mary and Arnold divorced only to reconcile and remarry in 1950 and moved to Pasadena, Texas, which is a suburb of Houston. However, the reconciliation was short-lived, and in 1953, the couple divorced again, and Mary retaining custody of Dean and his younger brother. Following her second divorce, Mary married a traveling clock salesman and moved to the small town of Vidor, Texas, where they would open a small family candy company. From early on, Dean worked day and night while still attending school at his family candy company. He and his younger brother were responsible for running the candy-making machines. Kind of fun.
Yeah.
And packing the product, which I'm going to say there would probably not be any candy in the package if I had anything to do with it.
Nope, absolutely not.
Yeah, it would be bad.
It would be everywhere.
Which his stepfather sold on his sales route. The route involved traveling to Houston, where much of the product was sold. From 1954 to 1958, Dean attended Vidor High School. It was said he was regarded as a well-behaved student who achieved satisfactory grades. It was also said Dean was considered somewhat of a loner, although he was known to occasionally have dated some girls in his teenage years.
Well, I hope so. I mean, because that's kind of normal.
Sure. because he was not normal in
I was
any
going
other
to say
way.
maybe the only normal thing he did.
After graduation from Vidor High School in 1958, Dean and his family moved to the northern outskirts of Houston so that his family candy business would be closer to the city where the majority of their product was sold. There, Dean's family opened a new shop. In 1960, at the request of his mother, Dean moved to Yoder, Indiana to live with his widowed grandmother. During this time, Dean formed a close relationship with a local girl who later proposed marriage to him in 1962, but he rejected. Dean lived in Indiana for almost 2 years, but returned to Houston in 1962 to once again help with his family's candy business, which by this date had moved to Houston Heights. In 1963, Dean's mother, Mary, divorced her husband and opened a new candy business, which she named Corll Candy Company, where she appointed Dean vice president. Yeah.
So she must have seen some normalcy and potential in him at some point.
Well, you usually do in your children, right?
Well, that's true. I've seen parents give them credit where credit wasn't due. So, yeah, okay, you're right.
In the same year, one of the teenage male employees of Corll Candy Company complained to Dean's mother that her son had made sexual advances towards him. In response, she fired the teenager.
You're kidding. So let's victim shame here.
Well, of course.
Yeah, I mean,
And
because
she's going to take up for her son.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
but back then, that's kind of out of the blue, right?
Yeah, I don't think people talked about stuff like that back then, so it probably was appalling to her. But still, don't you want to investigate? I mean, he's going to lie about it anyway.
But I'm
to
sure
his
he
mother.
was embarrassed to go to his boss, who is the man's mother,
right,
to claim these things.
Yeah.
So in August 1964, at the age of 24, Dean was drafted into the United States Army and later permanently assigned to Fort Hood, Texas. According to official military records, Dean's period of service was unblemished. Dean, however, reportedly hated military service and applied for a hardship discharge on the grounds that he was needed in his family's business. The Army granted his request, and he was given an honorable discharge in June 1965.
That wouldn't happen today.
Like, I need to make some candy, man.
Yeah, they'd be like, what?
Following Dean's discharge from the Army, he returned to Houston Heights and resumed the position he held as vice president of Corll Candy Company. In 1965, Corll Candy Company relocated to 22nd Street, directly across the street from Helms Elementary School. Dean was known to give free candy to local children, the teenage boys in particular. As a result of his behavior, Dean earned himself the nicknames of the Candy Man and the Pied Piper.
That's not good.
No. The company employed a small workforce, and he was seen to be flirtatious towards several teenage male employees. He installed a pool table in the back of the factory for all the kids to play and would give them rides on his motorcycle. They all looked at Dean like a good Boy Scout leader.
Oh, my goodness. Well, we know what that means today, don't we? That would be suspicious right off the bat today.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. They'd be like,
my kid's not hanging out with some grown man.
Yeah, something's not right. Mm-hmm.
So in 1967, Dean befriended a 12-year-old boy named David Brooks. David Brooks was one of the many youth who socialized at the Corll Candy Company. David admitted that Dean was one of the few people who did not mock him for the way he looked. David claims that whenever he told Dean he needed cash, Dean gave him money, so David started to view Dean as a father figure. But beginning in 1969, Dean began urging for a sexual relationship with David and would pay him with cash or gifts for sexual favors. In 1970, David's parents divorced, and he moved with his mother to Beaumont, a city 85 miles east of Houston. When he would visit his father in Houston, he would also visit Dean. During this time, Corll Candy Company failed and closed. Dean took a job as an electrician at the Houston Lighting and Power Company, which was known as HL&P. where he tested electrical relay systems. On September 25th, 1970, an 18-year-old college freshman, Jeffrey Conan, vanished while hitchhiking with another student from the University of Texas to his parents' home in Houston. He was dropped off at the corner of Westheimer Road and South Voss near the uptown area of Houston at approximately 6:15 p.m. Dean Corll likely offered Conan a lift to his home, which Conan evidently accepted. Shortly after Conan's disappearance, David Brooks interrupted Dean in the act of assaulting two teenage boys, whom Dean had strapped to a four-poster bed. Dean promised David a car in return for his silence, which was a green Chevrolet Corvette. Dean later told Wayne that he had killed the two boys and offered him $200, which is the equivalent of approximately $1,630 now in 2024, for any boy he could hire to lure to Dean's apartment.
So he'd groomed him.
Absolutely. And he's a teenage boy. He's not going to turn down a Corvette, money.
And that's a lot of money for a teenager.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot. And
especially one where his father's gone. He doesn't have a lot of money.
Yeah. And as teenagers, most teenagers don't think about the repercussions down the road.
No.
At all. You're just living in the moment.
Of course. So on December 13th, 1970, Wayne Brooks lured two 14-year-old Spring Branch youth named James Glass and Danny Yates away from a religious rally held in Houston Heights to Dean's apartment. Both boys were tortured and strangled by Dean Corll and buried in a boat shed he had rented on November 17th, 1970. 6 weeks later, on January 30th, 1971, Dean and Wayne encountered two teenage brothers, Donald and Jerry Waldrop, walking toward their parents' home. Both boys were enticed into Dean's van and driven to Dean's apartment, where they were raped and strangled and also buried in the boat shed.
So it sounds like his MO at this point is two boys at a time. Sounds like it makes you wonder if he didn't start with one and then get better and better, if you want to call it that, and then move to two, because that's a lot.
It's rare.
Two people at one time, but it seems like that's his MO at this point.
March 9th, 1971, 15-year-old Randall Harvey was last seen by his family cycling towards Oak Forest, where he worked part-time as a gas station attendant. Harvey was driven to Dean Corll's apartment, where he was killed by a single gunshot to the head. On the afternoon of May 29th, 1971, 13-year-old David Hillegeist and 16-year-old Gregory Malley Winkle were abducted and killed together. Both boys were murdered at another of Dean Corll's apartments. And by the way, Dean Corll is renting apartments by the month all over Houston and not staying in one place.
Yeah.
So he's constantly taking boys to different apartments.
Yeah, and it's probably, of course, in his mind, possibly he's thinking, if I don't stay in one spot, the cops won't catch me.
Oh, yeah.
So he's in movement constantly.
It's really smart, actually.
Right. On his
Sick,
part.
but smart.
Yeah.
So David Brooks is known to have participated in all of these abductions. This child.
Yeah.
As with all the missing youth, parents launched a frantic search for their sons. One of the youth who voluntarily offered to distribute posters the parents printed was 15-year-old Elmer Wayne Henley, who you will hear more about a little later in this story. Now, of course, the parents were going to the police about the missing boys, but the police station was smaller at that time and had no missing persons department. The police would tell the parents that the times had changed and boys were running away from the best of homes nowadays.
Well, I mean, of course.
I mean,
that's what teens do.
Seriously.
Now you can't get them out of your house. But back then,
they were just running away from everywhere.
Running rampant all over the streets of Houston. I mean,
stray boys everywhere.
What a way to get out of doing your job, Houston.
Oh, yeah. Well, I
Yay.
think that happens everywhere now. Like,
It does.
they're just a runaway.
Yeah. This has become a common theme. So it didn't just start.
No.
Obviously, this has been decades of this crap.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And in my opinion, if you're too young to get a job and make your life happen, because usually that happens at least 18 or older, then go look for them. What
Right.
is wrong with
They
these
don't need to be
cops?
on the streets. They're
No.
children. I don't get it.
Oh, don't worry about them. They're just runaways.
They'll find their way back.
Okay. Whatever. Okay, we're going to move on. On August 17th, 1971, Dean Corll and David Brooks encountered a 17-year-old acquaintance of David named Reuben Watson Haney, walking home from a movie theater. David persuaded Haney to attend a party at Dean's apartment, another one. Haney agreed and was taken to Dean's home, where he was strangled and buried in the boat shed. In September 1971, David Brooks assisted Dean Corll in the abduction and murder of 2 youth boys, and the identities of both victims remain unknown to this day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
They need to send whatever remains they have through DNA.
They have
testing.
been working on this.
Oh, my gosh.
They have been figuring this out, working on it all these years.
That's good.
In the winter of 1971, at age 15, Wayne Henley was taken by David Brooks to meet Dean Corll at his home on the promise he could participate in a deal where he could make some money. Wayne was an intended victim, but Dean decided that the teen would make a good accomplice. At Dean's home, Wayne was told by Dean that he belonged to an organization based in Dallas, which recruited young boys for a child's ring.
Oh, wow.
Now, see, that would make me run away. Like
For
far
sure.
away.
I'd be like, what the hell is that?
But Wayne Henley was offered the same fee as David Brooks, $200, for any boy whom he could bring to Dean Corll. So he's not going to turn that money down.
No.
Henley claims he ignored Dean's offer for several months, but in early 1972, he decided he would help find a boy due to his dire financial circumstances. At Dean Corll's home, Dean and Wayne Henley came up with a plan. Wayne Henley lured a teenage boy to Dean's Schuler Street apartment on the promise of smoking some marijuana. Once in the apartment, Wayne helped con the boy into handcuffs. Yeah, I just don't think so.
No. If I'm with someone I don't know,
And you're going to be like, let's put these
and they're
handcuffs
pulling
on.
some handcuffs out, I'm out. Yeah.
Then watch Dean pounce on the boy, tie his feet, and place tape over his mouth. Wayne then left the boy alone with Dean, believing he was to be sold into the ring. The next day, Dean paid Wayne $200. The identity of this first victim remains unknown.
Oh, wow.
On March 24th, 1972, Dean Corll, David Brooks, and Wayne Henley all encountered an 18-year-old acquaintance of Wayne's named Frank Aguirre, leaving a restaurant on Yale Street, where the boy worked. Wayne invited Aguirre over to drink beer and smoke marijuana with the three of them at Dean's apartment. Aguirre agreed and followed the three back to the apartment. Inside, they pounced on Aguirre and bound and gagged him. Corll raped, tortured, and killed Aguirre. Wayne and David assisted Dean in Aguirre's burial at High Island Beach. So now he's got 2 burial places.
Right.
The boat shed and the beach.
He's filling them up fast at this point.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's once a month.
And it sounds like there's not even a ring. Sounds like that's just something that they made up to get this other guy to help them out.
Yes. Like, oh, we're not going to do anything but just sell him into this ring and I'll just pay you.
Right. And in the meantime, making him a murderous accessory, unbeknownst to this young man, which, let's be honest, his character is questionable anyway. But the guy don't know that.
Right. On April 20th, 1972, Dean, Wayne, and David abducted 17-year-old Mark Scott. Scott was well known to the three, but was specifically chosen by Dean to be his next victim. According to Dean, he had recently cheated him on a deal, relating to stolen property.
Mm.
Scott was grabbed by force and fought against attempts by Dean to restrain him, even attempting to stab Dean with a knife. However, Scott saw Wayne pointing a pistol toward him and he just gave up. Scott was raped, tortured, and strangled and buried at High Island Beach.
Mm.
On June 26, 1972, Dean, Wayne, and David abducted 2 youth boys named Billy Balch and Johnny Delhomme. After being tortured and raped by Dean, Wayne strangled Balch and shot Delhomme in the forehead, with the bullet exiting through the boy's ear. Delhomme then pleaded with Wayne before he was strangled. Both boys were buried at High Island Beach.
Is High Island Beach in Galveston?
Yeah, it's off Boulevard Peninsula.
Wow.
So the date is unknown, but Dean, Wayne, and David lured a 19-year-old named William Rittinger to Dean's apartment. Rittinger was tied, tortured, and abused by Dean. David persuaded Dean to allow Rittinger to be released, and the youth was allowed to leave the residence. He is the only one that got away.
Oh, wow.
Shortly before midnight on July 19, 1972, 17-year-old Stephen Sickman was last seen leaving a party held in the Heights. The boy was savagely bludgeoned about the chest and with a blunt instrument before he was strangled and buried in the boat shed. Approximately 1 month later, on or about August 21, 1972, 19-year-old Rory Bunton was abducted while walking to his job as an assistant in Houston's shoe store. Bunton was gagged, shot twice in the head, and buried in the boat shed. Both of these victims were just identified in 2011.
Oh, wow.
So they've been working on this for years.
Yeah, and there's so many.
There's so many. On October 3rd, 1972, Wayne and David encountered 2 Heights teenagers, Wally J. Semino and Richard Hembry, walk into Hembry's home. Both boys were enticed into David's Corvette and driven to Dean's apartment.
Wait. How did 2 teenage boys fit into a Corvette?
Well, they're teenagers, so they all sat on top of each other.
I guess. But usually they're long-legged and, awkward. But I guess, if you want to take a ride, you're going to fit.
Absolutely. They're not going to turn down a ride in a Corvette. They're going to be like, I'll sit where I need to. I had a small car in high school. Of course, not a Corvette. But we fit so many people in that car.
Yeah, so that wasn't going to stop them. Not to mention at this point, unfortunately, we tell our children go, with a buddy, do the buddy system. But at this point, that's not even safe.
They are going with a buddy.
They're going with a buddy. So they really needed to go with 3 or 4 people, not just 2.
But they're going with people they barely know.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, I kind of know that guy.
And it's a cool car.
And it's an awesome car.
And that's why Dean Corll did that.
Chose that car.
Because he knew teenage boys are going to be drawn to that.
What other car would he get? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, this was yet another one of Dean's many apartments. And that evening, Semino is known to have phoned his mother's home and to have shouted the word mama into the receiver before the connection was terminated.
My God,
I can't imagine her. Oh my God.
Oh my God, my heart.
Yeah. The following morning, Hembry was accidentally shot in the mouth by Wayne, the bullet exiting through his neck. Hours later, both boys were strangled to death and buried in the boat shed.
Accidentally?
Wayne seems crazy. I think he's enjoying this.
Yeah, but he didn't accidentally do any of the other stuff. So why is this one accidental?
I think he's playing around and I don't
accidentally
even know.
pulled the trigger.
Accidentally pulled the trigger.
I mean, because it happens all the time.
Well, of course, it happens to me every day when I'm playing
play with knives, play with guns. I mean, it's a hobby.
Of course.
Red flag, guys. Red flag. Don't have friends who have a hobby of playing with guns, not shooting guns, playing with them and playing with knives and whittling coffins in their garage. Okay. Red flag. Don't forget that.
Oh, man. Guys, pick your friends wisely.
For sure.
In November 1972, 18-year-old Willard Branch, an Oak Forest youth, known to both Dean and Wayne, disappeared while hitchhiking from Mount Pleasant to Houston. He was gagged and emasculated and buried in the boat shed.
Horrible.
On November 11th, 1972, a 19-year-old Spring Branch youth named Richard Kepner disappeared on his way to a phone booth. Kepner was strangled and buried at High Island Beach. In January 1973, Dean Corll killed 17-year-old Joseph Lyles, who was known to both Dean and David. I mean, the list just goes on. It's so heartbreaking.
And it makes you wonder, was the news putting all of these disappearances out? Because, and it doesn't mean that the teenage boys are going to be aware of the disappearances, but surely the parents watch the news. I mean, for sure back then, you had a routine, and the evening news was one of those things. And weren't they putting that on the news and letting people know? And I know it's different vicinities of Houston, but everybody knows there was only like 2 or 3 stations, especially in the 60s, for the whole Houston area.
Well, even us growing up, there were 3 stations.
Yeah.
And, our mom loved the news.
Mm-hmm.
That was her thing. She
Mm-hmm.
slept through most of them, but she got the gist of each one. And I remember watching it, and Houston's huge, so they can only put so much, but there's got to be like a warning, like, hey, parents, you need to pay attention, watch your boys. Something's happening to them.
Or be on the lookout for our children. There's someone out there stalking
worry
them.
about them. Why are you just letting this go?
Yeah, it makes, and even the newspapers, everybody took a paper.
Yes.
Was it in the papers? Why wasn't this information out on the streets?
They just acted like, oh, they're just runaways. They'll be back.
Yeah.
No big deal.
But you would think they'd have taken notice at some point. I mean, at this point,
there's so
many that didn't, someone clue in, hey, we got a problem here, Houston. Hey, Houston, there's a problem. Jesus. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Times have changed, folks. Be glad for social media at this point.
Absolutely. You can get anything out there. I mean,
right.
We're even on here.
Yeah. Talking about it now.
If we had this back then.
Mm-hmm.
So there were no known victims killed between February 1st and June 4th of 1973. Dean Corll is known to have suffered from hydrocele in early 1973, which may have contributed to the inactivity. Hydrocele is an accumulation of fluid in a body cavity, the most common being around the testicles. I mean,
what?
If that's not fitting.
That is perfect.
Ugh.
It saved some lives.
It did, and I'm sure a lot.
Yeah.
It is also known that his accomplice Wayne Henley also temporarily relocated to Mount Pleasant in an effort to distance himself from Dean Corll, which may be another reason for the sudden lull in killings.
Yeah, because you think about it, obviously we talked about earlier that his MO seems to be 2 boys at a time, and it's going to be easier to accomplish that with help. With an accomplice.
Not just that, he's got young teenage boys helping him lure them, like, hey man, you want to go party? It's going to be weird even back then if an older man comes up and is like, hey man, you want to go hang out over here in my apartment?
Right.
He needs those boys.
Yeah.
And from what it sounds like, Wayne Henley really enjoyed this. He was of course he was abused by Dean Corll himself,
right,
but he kept coming back and kept doing this.
Well, he had a car. He was getting money.
Well, no, he wasn't the one with the car.
Oh, it was the other. It was
David Brooks.
So, but they're partying.
But they're making money.
So, Dean Corll's paying him well as a teenager. Mm-hmm. So, thank God that there was some conviction that they put some distance at some point.
Well, the killings wouldn't stop, though. On June 4th, 1973, Dean Corll and Wayne Henley, who is now back with Dean, abducted a 15-year-old boy named William Ray Lawrence, who was last seen alive by his father on 31st Street. After 3 days of abuse and torture, Lawrence was strangled before being buried at Lake Sam Rayburn. Less than 2 weeks later, a 20-year-old Raymond Stanley Blackburn was abducted, strangled, and buried at Lake Sam Rayburn.
So now he's got a third burial site.
Mm-hmm.
So Corll goes, hey, my ball's deflated. Let's get back to business as usual.
We got to make up for lost time.
You know?
Hit it hard.
What the hell?
Yeah. On July 6, 1973, while attending classes at the coach's driving school, Wayne Henley became acquainted with a 15-year-old boy named Luis Garcia. The following day, Garcia telephoned his mother to say he was spending the night with a friend. He was shot and left to bleed to death in Dean Corll's bathtub before being buried at Lake Sam Rayburn. 5 days later, on July 12, 1973, 17-year-old John Sellers of Orange County was bound, shot to death, and buried at High Island Beach.
Oh, so now they've switched back over.
They're going back and forth.
Wow. That's insane.
Yeah. After David Brooks married his pregnant fiancée in July 1973, Wayne Henley temporarily became Dean Corll's sole accomplice. So David Brooks is like, hey, man, I've got this pregnant fiance. I'm getting married. I'm out. I can't do this anymore.
God bless his fiance and this baby coming into the world at this point.
Yeah.
That's a lot of baggage on top of their life changing.
Yeah. On July 19th, 1973, 15-year-old Michael Balch, the brother of previous victim Billy Balch, was last seen by his family on his way to get a haircut. He was strangled and buried at Lake Sam Rayburn.
Oh, my goodness.
2 of them.
Oh, my goodness.
The family.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. On July 25th, 1973, Charles Cobble and Marty Ray Jones were abducted and killed together. Wayne Henley later buried both boys in the boat shed. August 3rd, 1973 was Dean Corll's last killing. A 13-year-old boy named James Stanton Dramala of South Houston was abducted by Dean while riding his bike in Pasadena and driven to Dean's residence at Lamar Drive. Dean shared a pizza with Dramala and spent 45 minutes with him before attacking him. He was raped, tortured, and strangled before being buried in the boat shed. He's a baby.
Yeah, and, instead
riding
of candy,
his
he
bike.
did pizza. And who knows, maybe, you don't know the backstory. This kid might have just been hungry, and he picked up on that and used it to lure him. And at this point, my thought is, how big is this damn boat shed?
Well, we have pictures.
Okay. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
And I think they were all kind of buried on top of each other. Yeah. So, the end of Dean Corll. On the evening of August 7th, 1973, Wayne Henley invited a 20-year-old Timothy Curley to attend a party at Dean Corll's Pasadena home as an intended victim. The 2 boys arrived at Dean's home, where they sniffed paint fumes and drank alcohol until midnight, before leaving the house, promising to return shortly. They picked up a friend, 15-year-old Rhonda Williams, who had been invited to join the boys at Dean's home. Now, she had been abused by her father and kind of left, so they picked her up and invited her back. The 3 arrived back to Dean's residence at approximately 3 a.m. on the morning of August 8th. Dean was furious that Wayne had brought a girl back to his house, because we don't bring girls back.
A girl?
Ugh, a girl?
What in the world?
Telling him in private that he had ruined everything. Dean appeared to have calmed down and watched for about 2 hours as the 3 teenagers sniffed paint fumes, smoked marijuana, and drank beer until they passed out. Now that's creepy.
That is creepy.
Some dude just watching y'all party? Come on now.
And the thing is, there's a couple of people in this group that knows this guy's a weirdo. So I wouldn't be putting myself in that situation for sure.
Yeah.
for sure, because obviously Dean Corll is not trustworthy at all. He's a pervert.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, those boys' egos were probably rampant at that point.
Well, Wayne Henley awoke to find himself lying on his stomach while Dean Corll snapped handcuffs onto his wrists.
Oh, there's the handcuff.
His mouth had been taped shut and his ankles had been bound together. Timothy Curley and Rhonda Williams lay beside Wayne, securely bounded with rope, lying face down on the floor. Curley had been stripped naked. Noticing Wayne had awoken, Dean removed the gag from his mouth and reiterated that he was angry that Wayne had brought a girl back to his house and that he intended to kill all three after he had assaulted and tortured Curley. He then lifted Wayne to his feet and dragged him into the kitchen and placed a .22 caliber pistol to his stomach, threatening to shoot him. Wayne calmed Dean down by promising to assist in the torture and murder of Curley and Williams. After approximately 30 minutes, Dean agreed and untied Wayne, and the two went back into the bedroom where Curley and Williams were tied up. Dean then hands Wayne a hunting knife and tells him that while he is assaulting Curley, he wants Wayne to cut off Williams' clothes and do the same to her. Like a group assault. He tries asking Dean if he can take Williams into another room, but Dean ignores him. Wayne then grabs Dean's pistol, shouting, "You've gone too far, Dean." Dean approaches Wayne, shouting, "You won't do it." Wayne then fired at Dean, hitting him in the forehead. The bullet failed to penetrate Dean's skull, and he continued to lunge toward Wayne, who fired another 2 rounds, hitting Dean in the left shoulder. Dean then ran out of the room, hitting the wall of the hallway. Wayne fired 3 additional bullets into his lower back and shoulder as Dean slid down the hallway outside the room where the 2 other teenagers were bound. Dean Corll died where he fell, his naked body facing the wall. Okay.
Shot by his own accomplice.
Yep.
Yeah. Good enough for him. Unfortunately, though, in this scenario, we always want to see justice all the way through towards the end. But I'm going to be honest. He got what he deserved.
Oh, he did.
Yeah.
Way too late, though.
Way too late. Yeah. Agreed.
So at 8:24 a.m. on the morning of August 8th, 1973, the call was made to the Pasadena Police Department from the hysterical 17-year-old Wayne Henley. In this call, Henley blurted to the operator, "Y'all better come here right now. I just killed a man." Patrolman A.B. Jameson raced over to 2020 Lamar Drive where he found 3 teenagers, Wayne Henley, Timothy Curley, and Rhonda Williams. Upon entering the house, officers found 33-year-old Dean Corll naked and dead, having been shot 6 times with bullets lodging in the chest, shoulder, and head. Detectives arrived to examine the crime scene, noticing it had been rigged up for a special purpose. There was plastic sheeting covering the carpet to protect it from dripping blood. Bedding on one single bed was all tangled and disarrayed. The most sinister was the large, thick plywood board with several handcuffs, ropes, and cords attached to it.
Oh, wow.
On the floor was a bayonet-like knife, binding tape, glass tubes, petroleum jelly, and 8 pairs of handcuffs.
Oh, my gosh.
In the shed in the backyard, there was a plywood box with drilled air holes cut into it and some strands of human hair inside. Neighbors said that house had belonged to Dean Corll's father, who let his son take over the house when he had moved away. Dean had taken care of the house and had done nothing to arouse suspicions. Okay. Yeah, because he had apartments
all over Houston.
Everywhere. So he never used the house.
Yeah, he never showed up there often.
No. The next day, August 9th, 1973, David Brooks showed up to the police station with his father. David tells police that Wayne Henley isn't telling the whole truth. Now, there are stories where David denies it. But then there's the interviews that I watched saying, no, Wayne denied it all. David came in and said, nope, this is what actually happened. And he came in with his father.
And that had to be heartbreaking for the father.
The father, the fiance.
Yeah. Yeah. But, the father
you have to give all respect to him. I know he did a lot of bad stuff, but he was like, no, we're going to put this to rest.
Right. And I'm sure his father had a lot to do with him going in and telling the truth. The truth that probably the closest to the truth you're going to get, other than what the DNA brings us. Yeah.
Right. Well, he went in to the police station saying, Wayne Henley is an accomplice. He is not a victim. This is when Wayne Henley decides to finally confess. Wayne tells police that for almost 3 years, he and David Brooks had helped abduct and later murder teenage boys for Dean Corll, some of whom had been their own friends. And actually, Wayne Henley was known to, he told his friend Corll that was assaulted by Dean Corll the day that he killed him, that if you had not been my friend, I would have made $200 off you.
Oh, wow.
Thanks.
Right.
I mean, how do you take that when someone says that to you?
Well,
like, oh,
there's
wow,
going to
okay.
be some survival guilt there too, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
How did I get out of this?
Yeah.
So he also stated to police that Dean had paid them $200 for each victim. Wayne agreed to accompany police to Dean's boat shed, where he claimed the bodies of most of the victims could be found. Upon opening the boat shed, police found a half-strip stolen car, a child's bike, a large iron drum, water containers, 2 sacks of lime, and a large plastic bag full of teenage boys' clothes. Police began digging through the soft, crushed shell earth of the boat shed and soon discovered the body of a teenage boy encased in clear plastic and buried beneath a layer of lime. Police continued excavating through the earth of the shed, unearthing the remains of more victims in varying stages of decomposition. Most of the bodies were wrapped in thick, clear plastic sheeting. Some victims had been shot, others strangled. David Brooks agreed to accompany the police to Lake Sam Rayburn, where 2 more bodies were found. And both David Brooks and Wayne Henley accompanied police to High Island Beach, where more bodies had been buried. Altogether, the bodies of 29 known victims of Dean Corll were found.
That is crazy to me.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
On August 13th, 1973, a grand jury convened in Harris County, Texas, to hear evidence against Wayne Henley and David Brooks. The first witnesses to testify were Rhonda Williams and Timothy Hurley to the events of August 7th and 8th. Another witness who testified to his experience was William Rittinger, who recounted his abuse at the hands of Dean Corll before being released. After listening to over 6 hours of testimony on August 14th, the grand jury indicted Wayne Henley on 3 counts of murder and David Brooks on 1 count. Bail for each was set at $100,000. Wayne Henley was not charged with the death of Dean Corll, which prosecutors would ultimately rule on September 8th had been committed in self-defense. Sure.
I mean, they did Texas a favor at that point. Or, he did the state of Texas a favor at that point.
He did, but the only reason he shot him, which I'm glad he did, but the only reason that he did it was like, dude, I don't want to.
Yeah.
You just asked too much of me now.
And now all of a sudden he's asking too much.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But whatever.
Wayne. By the time the grand jury had completed its investigation, Wayne Henley had been indicted for 6 murders and David Brooks for 4. Both would later reject pretrial offers presented to them by Assistant District Attorney of life sentences in exchange for pleas of guilty to the murders for which they had been indicted. The pretrial motion that Wayne Henley undergo a psychiatric examination to determine whether he was mentally competent to stand trial was also opposed by his attorney, upon the grounds the ruling would violate his constitutional rights.
Oh, wow.
That's interesting to me.
He knew he was sane.
Yes.
Yeah. He knew
It surprised me.
Yeah.
Wayne Henley and David Brooks were tried separately for the roles in the murders. Wayne Henley was brought to trial in San Antonio, Texas on July 1st, 1974, and charged with 6 murders committed between March 1972 and July 1973. The prosecution called 24 witnesses, including Curley and Rittinger, and introduced 82 pieces of evidence.
That's a lot.
On July 15th, 1974, both counsels presented their closing arguments to the jury, the prosecution seeking life imprisonment, the defense a verdict of not guilty.
Wow.
In his closing argument to the jury, the district attorney apologized for his not being able to seek the death penalty. The jury deliberated for 92 minutes before finding Henley guilty of all 6 murders, for which he was tried the following day, July 16th. Formal procedures to sentence Wayne for the 6 guilty verdicts began. On August 8th, the judge ordered that Henley serve each 99-year sentence consecutively, totaling 594 years, and he was transferred to the Huntsville unit to formally begin his sentence.
Which is where he needed to be.
Wayne appealed his sentence and conviction, of course, contending the jury in his initial trial had not been sequestered, that his attorney's objections to news media being present in the courtroom had been overruled, and citing that his defense team attempts to present evidence contending that the initial trial should not have been held in San Antonio and also been overruled by the judge. Wayne's appeal was upheld and he was awarded a retrial in December 1978.
Where did he want it to be held? In Houston?
Well, yeah.
Well, that makes no sense because typically what they want to do is move it out of the city.
That's the only way to get a fair trial.
Yeah, to move it out of the city so people won't be, already have their opinion based upon what was going on because, it's in Houston. Obviously, the media knew about it.
He was going to fight it no matter
what.
Wayne's retrial began on June 18th, 1979. The second trial was held in Corpus Christi, Texas. Wayne's attorneys again attempted to have Wayne's written statements ruled inadmissible. However, the judge ruled written statements given by Wayne on August 9th, 1973 as admissible evidence. The retrial lasted 9 days. On June 27th, 1979, the jury deliberated for over 2 hours before reaching their verdict. Wayne Henley was again convicted of 6 murders and sentenced to 6 consecutive 99-year terms.
Yay.
Yeah. So David Brooks was brought to trial on February 27th, 1975. He had been indicted for 4 murders committed between December 1970 and June 1973, but was brought to trial charged only with the June 1973 murder of 15-year-old William Ray Lawrence. David's defense attorney argued that his client had not committed any murders and attempted to portray Corll and, to a lesser degree, Wayne Henley as being the active participants in the actual killings. Now, which is not true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was clearly part of it from the very beginning.
Right.
Assistant District Attorney dismissed the defense's contention outright, at one point telling the jury, this defendant was in on the killings, this murderous rampage from the very beginning. He tells you he was a cheerleader, if nothing else. That's what he was telling you about his presence. You know he was in on it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, he knew about it. So he should be held responsible at the bare minimum because he knew what was going on and didn't call the police.
He didn't just
anything.
know about it. He was luring these people in his car.
Right. He was
being paid for it, and he knew what was happening. He walked in on it.
So this is one of those, people who are not remorseful at all. If they're going to fight that they're not guilty under these circumstances, fry them Come on, Texas. Give me some good news here.
So David's trial lasted less than 1 week. The jury deliberated for just 90 minutes before they reached a verdict. He was found guilty of Lawrence's murder on March 4th, 1975, and sentenced to life in prison. David showed no emotion as the sentence was passed.
Because he didn't care.
Although his wife burst into tears. Well, yeah.
I mean, of course.
Brooks also appealed his sentence, contending that the signed confessions used against him were taken without his being informed of his legal rights.
Oh,
well, of course. But his appeal was dismissed in May 1979. Wayne Henley is serving his life sentence at the Mark Stiles Unit in Jefferson County, Texas. Parole applications dating from July 1980 have been denied.
Good.
He is next eligible for parole in October 2025.
Come on, Texas. Don't let us down.
David Brooks served his life sentence at the Terrell Unit near Rocheron, Texas. He died of COVID-19 related complications at a Galveston hospital on May 28, 2020, at the age of 65. Brooks is buried at Captain Joe Byrd Cemetery in Walker County. So there are possible additional victims. 42 boys had vanished from Houston Heights between 1970 and Dean Corll's death in 1973. Former workers at Corll Candy Company recalled Corll doing a lot of digging in the years leading up to 1968, when his mother's third marriage was deteriorating and the firm was failing. Corll stated he was burying spoiled candy to avoid contamination by insects. He subsequently cemented over the floor. He was also observed digging in waste ground that was later converted into a parking lot. Great. Former workers also recalled that Corll had rolls of plastic of precisely the same type used to bury his victims. Moreover, co-workers at HLMP also stated that from the earliest days of his employment, Corll had repeatedly retained coils of used nylon cord that would otherwise have been discarded. This brand of cord was the same type used to strangle and bind the bodies of many of his victims.
Wow.
The suspicion is that Corll began killing much earlier than 1970 and had been abusing youth prior to this date.
Oh, of course. Because let's be honest, by the time you're getting up to 2 victims at a time, you've already got a routine.
Done it.
You've done it. Because you're not going to go in on 2 victims your first time. I mean, more than likely, that's not going to happen. So this guy decided, hey, I need some accomplices because I need to up the ante.
Well, he's getting older, right?
Yeah.
He was in his early 20s when he was, hey, guys, you want to play pool and eat some candy?
Yeah.
And he was getting older, so he needed someone to help him lure these boys in. Like, hey, I'll get you something to...
Yeah, and he evidently had the money to be able to purchase cars and, fund some money because he had apartments all over Houston. So, and another reason why I think he, of course, was a little more experienced is he had different apartments all over Houston. So he knew to shift and move throughout the city. And again, Houston was even big back then, folks. So, he was smart enough, if you want to call it that, to move throughout Houston.
He really, that's the scary part. He really was smart. He got away with it for a while and took a lot of boys' lives.
And probably a lot longer than we even possibly know.
Can't even imagine.
And how many, if he had not been shot and killed, how many more would have been in his path? That's so scary.
Now, I feel for the boys, his accomplices. They were young boys when he started, and he groomed them to that. But you have to say at some point they're hardened and desensitized to those things. So they're going to keep doing it as well.
Right. And you don't know what their background was either.
Right.
Had they already been SA'd at any point in their life and this was just kind of some normalcy, they were already on that path anyway, and they all just happened to find each other.
Because it didn't scare them away.
Yeah.
They kept coming back for more.
Yeah. And I'm sure Dean Corll knew that they were vulnerable in that way, and that's why he picked them. So yeah, interesting.
It's just heartbreaking. I will say that there are more details online that you can find regarding the way he murdered his victims. I could not. I cried. I could not put those details in this story. If you want to know what they are, you can find them.
He
It
completely
made me
tortured them.
sick. It was bad.
Yeah,
just heartbreaking.
He got exactly what he deserved. And he didn't deserve to breathe another day's air, really.
He got an easy death.
Yeah, he really did. Not torturous.
No, he deserved way much more, but it is what it is. At least he's gone.
Yeah.
We didn't have to pay for him.
Right.
Sitting there.
Absolutely. Because we know he'd have gotten the death penalty in the state of Texas anyway. But again, taxpayers' dollars would have paid for him to breathe. And you folks know how I feel about that. So, in these scenarios, just get rid of them. So,
yep.
Yeah.
So, guys, that is the story for today. Candyman #1 in Houston. Sadly, we have 2 Candymen.
Yeah, 2. So what do you think, guys? Have you heard about the story? What do you think? Do you think that Dean Corll got what he deserved, or do you wish he'd have been kept alive and put through the trial to see what the jury would do to him, and he had ultimately ended up in Huntsville prison, which is torturous in itself. But what do you think should have happened to him? I think he got what he deserved.
I agree.
Yeah.
But also, what do you think about the punishment that the boys received?
Yeah.
David Brooks and Wayne Henley. Do you believe that they got what they deserved being in prison, or do you feel bad for them because they were groomed by him at a young age?
Yeah, I think life for sure. They didn't get the death penalty, and I think that's fair.
I do too.
If they'd have gotten the death penalty, that might have been a little questionable because we don't know the real story on that relationship for sure. You've got to go off of 2 other murderers and what they say.
Oh, yeah, and they lie through the whole thing.
Yeah, so
blaming the other.
Who knows? Who knows what truly happened? But they were groomed, no doubt. But at some point, humanity has to come through, and they have to decide, look, this isn't even worth it, and for sure one of them wasn't sorry for what he did. So I think they got exactly what they deserved in the end.
Yeah, guys, so let us know what you think.
Yeah, let us know. Drop a comment. But we will go for now. We'll be back soon with another true crime story. And happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
And until next time, see the good and stay imperfectly perfect.
Bye, guys. Thank you.